more fun to do it with somebody, way more fun. And the interactions that we had, we would spend hours arguing about one word. And so rather than keep that and go take up the whole hour, we're going to introduce ourselves with a little radio play about the topic that we get a little bit excited about in one way or the other. And but let's go around and introduce ourselves. And I will say that I'm Harriet, and I've been with Rethinking Psychiatry since Robert Whitaker came. I went to the first symposium, and that was when I thought, this might be my people. And I have been participating with the planning group since then to try and help bring educational opportunities to the community and also learn from each other in this process of understanding what works, what doesn't work, what's going on here. With mental health and what's called mental illness. So, and I identify as a seeker, the topic of spirituality, and continually searching for truth. So I'm a seeker, I'm an experiencer, I have had a spiritual awakening experience, and I am also a therapist counselor. So I work with people, and that's part of what I do.
I'm Miranda Lovelong, and one housekeeping thing, the little boys and girls room, exactly what it says, is right down that hallway. So if you need that, go ahead and go down there. I am an experiencer, and what I consider, I thought now I understand all this, I consider that I was pathologized as having bipolar or psychotic experiences, but you will hear more about my story in the role play.
And you can pass or say your name.
My name is Harriet Shields. I'm an experiencer and a seeker.
I'm Linda Shields. I'm all of the Lane Young, all three.
Ross Runkle, mainly seeker, a little experiencer.
Leah, I have my own experience.
Rick, experiences.
Seeker, experiencer, and I'm not sure of the future.
I'm Tom, I've been a peer kid, and I'm currently 63.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for being here.
You know what? Last year's seeker, little experience also.
Carrie, I was part of the definition, but I consider myself a traveler. I've had lots of experiences and a lot of different experiences. I work to figure out how to help people remember that was important experiences.
I also missed the definition of some of those.
Okay, so just for people that need, a seeker is someone who is continuing on the path of deepening our spiritual awareness, our truth, our understanding, our development. That's seeker. Experiencer means we've had some significant experiences of spiritual emergence, awakening, you know, some of those aha moments that tell us that things are more than we ever thought they were, kind of experiences. And a therapist teacher is someone who has gotten to the point in their journey where part of what we do in the world is actually working with people who are going through experiences to help them navigate what can be a tumultuous journey at times.
Yeah, it goes in all of those
Calgary's a naturopathic physician, and this is amazing.
My name is Gary, and I'm more of a seeker. I'm Barbara.
seeker and the sharer.
Mark, I'm an experiencer, a teacher, I'm not a seeker.
Is it
I don't have to be much.
All of the above.
I'm Mary. I like to travel a bit, but I also was a line worker, so I have to say my own definition of stuff.
I'm an experiencer, but also I believe that it doesn't stop there. We continue to seek. And I am a counselor in training.
I'm Sue Johnny and seeker experiencer healer.
I'm Julie, I'm a seeker and sometimes a finder.
I'm Alan, I'm mostly a seeker, I guess. I've had some experiences, I think, I'm not sure. Also a sharer, and I like to comment over there. I'm not necessarily a seeker in a broader sense, but I feel more like it's going to find me, whatever it is I think I'm looking for.
I'm Willow, and I'm all three.
I'm Donna, and I identify with being a seeker, a healer, and a teacher.
I'm David, and I'm a seeker.
I'm Joan, and I'm a perpetual seeker with a curiosity gene.
And I'm Kim, and I'm a seeker and experiencer.
I'm Todd, I'm a seeker and experiencer.
Lisa, I'm a seeker.
I'm Taylor, and I'm a seeker.
David, fairly lazy seeker, or not lazy. Any interest seeking would be among them, but I don't regard him very highly as far as putting a lot of effort into it. And yeah, I'm a bit of an experiencer.
I'm Brandon, all above.
And for those who walked in late, we're just saying our names, and whether you're a seeker of spiritual experiences, an experiencer of what you would call, some strong spiritual awakening or unusual experiences, and if you are a therapist or counselor.
My name is Avi, and seeker and experiencer. My name's Brian. I think I'm more of an observer.
A what?
An observer.
Observer.
I'm Steve. I'm probably a little bit of all three, but more healer than anything, I would say.
I'm Kathy. I've been a seeker. Then I became a Unitarian.
You stopped seeking.
I really don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kevin, and I was very surprised when I became an experiencer.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. And we'll do a little bit more of a little introduction to the talk with a play. And I am going to need 11 people or 10 people.
10 people.
Miranda Lovelong.
Wow.
11 people who would like to be part of this play. Okay, so you are going to be the narrator, and you get to be Dr. Cooke. You want to be Terry or Karen? Okay, you can be Karen. Okay. And Terry, who'd like to be Terry?
Is this going to happen early on?
Yes. You don't have to be nervous for long. Laura. Or would you rather be Peter? Peter.
Don't worry about that. He's also filming over there.
You're Laura, so you're Terry. So remember who you are, because I won't. Do we have a Peter yet? Maybe someone to read. Okay, you're going to be Pat. Fred. Now some of these are just one-liners. These are not big parts. And you have the script. Fred. Louise. Oh, I think we got two there. And Henry. Okay, this is just a little radio play to introduce us to the topic of spiritual emergence and emergency, and some of the challenges that we get in. With this topic. So narrator can start.
Okay. The scene takes place in the home of Miranda Lovelong, a social entrepreneur and organizer. The scene takes place in the home of Miranda Lovelong, a social entrepreneur and organizer who has opened her home for potluck discussion groups where individuals going through powerful experiences of non-ordinary consciousness can get together to discuss their experiences as assets rather than liabilities. While waiting for dinner to warm up, a heated discussion has been warming up as well.
So glad you're hosting these groups, Miranda. So many of us don't have a friendly environment where we can talk about other perspectives of extreme states and mental illness.
Oh, that word again. I cringe and almost get sick to my stomach when I hear the word mental illness. We have to develop another way to understand extreme states of consciousness. They are, to me, the mind's way of healing itself, a process of evolution. I hate the way we pathologize extreme states of consciousness as illness.
I agree. That many states of non-ordinary consciousness are positive and healing processes, and often are confused with mental illness. You know my story. I went through that difficult period with lots of losses and life challenges, started meditating, and had a beautiful mystical experience of unitive consciousness and the deepest love that I have ever experienced. And then I made the mistake of telling my boss about it, and she sent me to see the psychiatrist who said I had bipolar disorder and needed to be on medications. My medical license was suspended for almost a year. It was totally absurd to me. I've worked with people in manic periods, and my experience had some similarities, but also significant differences. I felt very stable. On a positive note, the experience let me personally feel how demoralizing it is to suddenly lose one's credibility and have one's insights and judgment invalidated. I think the worst part was how terrible it felt to have such a sacred experience considered to be a mental pathology.
I was luckier than you when I first had my first mystical experiences. I was director of a spiritual camp and retreat center, and so my experiences were accepted because I was not pathologized for having mystical experiences. In some ways, I was envied by others who wished that they had those experiences. I was accepted and supported as a spiritual leader in my community and among my peers and colleagues until my experiences crossed that line from mystical experience into spiritual emergency and psychosis. I went far beyond the typical experience of mainstream Protestant religion. I got lost in the psychic and spiritual oneness realms and couldn't get back on my own. Not to say that we didn't incorporate that, but a lot of people did not understand it. According to modern psychiatry definitions, I was psychotic. I entered into altered states of consciousness, felt one half of the universe. I was walking around naked in the neighborhood in the middle of a December freeze. I could see and smell and feel things that no one else could. I could sense negative spirits all around me, among other things. To me, it felt like a dream state. I remember it, but I was shocked to awake in the hospital to find out that everyone else knew about my dream. worst part? Well, the worst part was the nightmare of being forcibly held down, stripped naked, yelled at, and drugged in the ER. I guess I put my clothes back on by then. When I awoke to find out that the nightmare was real, I felt like I had been forcibly raped. Then the nightmare got worse. I was told by the psychiatrist that I had a serious mental illness, that I would never recover, and that I had to take serious antipsychotics and mood stabilizers for life to manage my depression. And because the doctor diagnosed me with mental illness, everyone around me started treating me like I was mentally ill. That was the worst thing of all. I started to believe it myself.
Just another place here.
I thought I was crazy, and the life I hoped for myself was over.
Wow, I can see how powerful this whole topic is to Miranda. What do you think set you up for the whole ordeal?
Well, this was back in 2011, when the Occupy movement started. I got very involved, seeing and hearing about how so many people are suffering under our economic systems and the economic crisis and our
What did that guy's gonna be in the way? I was gonna go way up there in front of him.
Well, we understand. I went through that in 2007 to have extreme states other than extreme depression at that point. But how'd you get beyond the labels and the limitations that the psychiatrist gave you?
Thank God for Rethinking Psychiatry. It literally saved my life. Someone told me about your film festival, and I attended and started thinking that maybe there was a different way to understand and work with what I was going through. I was still looking for alternative ways of managing my extreme emotional states, though, as if they were the problem. And I was so sad that I couldn't be joyful. God, I'm gonna cry.
Yay!
Okay.
Crying. Holy emotions, blessed be.
I couldn't allow myself to be my joy. My middle name is Joy, and I could not be myself. Because if I went too far, then I was afraid I would go into another episode. And so I was trying really hard to manage my symptoms, but it was really hard. Then I came across a website on spiritual emergency, and I started to think of my experience from a very different place, and definitely not an illness.
Miranda, I am so glad you found information on the web about spiritual emergency. It sounds like it is what is going on for you. However, as a doctor, it is useful to make some distinctions between potentially healing and transformative experiences and pathological states of mind. Though they can look the same, their causes and optimal treatments can be very different. People can have infections, autoimmune disorders, tumors or hormone imbalances, food sensitivities, toxic levels of pollutants and heavy metals, and other metabolic disorders, degenerative neurological diseases. These all can create behavioral changes that look just like mental health challenges from psychological and spiritual causes. And there's also an overlap for many people where temporary extreme states of consciousness can lead to significant suffering and dysfunction in a person's life. Classifying things as an illness can have advantages. It lets us know someone needs help, time off work, sick pay benefits, health care, therapy, and our support. It helps doctors, healers, and researchers look for underlying causes to help alleviate extreme suffering, so that people going through challenging mental health periods can live joyful and meaningful lives. It helps planners know how to allocate resources and what resources are needed.
Karen?
Who's Karen?
Karen? I think I prefer my illness. Do we have Karen? I think you're Karen.
You're Karen. Right after Dr. Hood?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm not following the pages very well. Okay. I think I prefer my illness to have a name because it makes me feel less lonely. I know there are other people experiencing my kind of misery and that I lived through it and can make a meaningful existence with it. But I have to be careful not to adopt the sick since I know I would just give up if I did that.
When someone confronts you with the line "you're ill," it's easy to reject it out of hand and dismiss it totally. This kept me in limbo for 6 years. But acceptance of aspects of my condition as illness was a turning point for me to become well. Denial was a natural reaction, though, because our society has such a dim view of mental illness, and my own stigma is so negative. Denial was my way of feeling meaningful and like a valid human being deserving to have my thoughts and feelings honored and respected. When I accepted the idea that some of my experience was unnecessarily painful and an obstacle to what I wanted to create with my life, I began to actively look for therapies, sometimes medications, that would help me feel stronger and more control. I've seen many people stuck in the place of thinking nothing is wrong.
It was opposite for me. For a number of years I accepted the medical model as a valid framework, but I wasn't getting better and started reading on my own. My reading suggested the model might not stand up to scientific scrutiny. The emphasis on distress as illness not only encouraged me to resort to exclusively physical treatments like drugs and ECT, but pushed to the side any consideration of content and meaning to my crisis episodes. Thinking of myself as having a chronic and incurable illness robbed me of my power and agency and confined me in a negative category. The medical model worked for me for many years, but became unsatisfactory.
When I was told I had a disease, I began to undergo a radically dehumanizing and devaluing transformation. I went from being Pat D to being a schizophrenic.
Maybe my sensitivity to the illness label is because being given a diagnosis is not like saying there's something wrong with your liver, but there's something wrong with you.
Once past the relief's response, on learning a name for the distress, the label doesn't alleviate any pain. It doesn't help the professional understand what is happening or why or what would help the individual. It can stop the individual from owning their experience and finding their way through it to the other side. Labeled people are seen as less competent or inferior. I watch people become dependent and helpless with treatments and labels.
I hear you all, but there's a point where challenging extreme states become what we call an illness. We don't function in ways that support our life, our healing, our ability or ability to relate to others in mutually respectful and satisfying ways. Maybe the problem lies in what we attach to the ideas of illness and the false assumptions we have made historically about mental illness states. Lack of meaningful content in our experiences, and the idea that these illness states are chronic with no recovery possible outside of symptom control and learning how to cope with our unusual perceptions.
Or maybe there is some essential negative energy in the word illness itself. I just opened up an ancient text called a dictionary to see the official historical meaning of the word ill. Worse, worst, unwell, sick, evil, wicked, bad, of ill repute, objectionable, poor, faulty, ill-mannered, hostile, unkindly, ill-feeling, unfavorable, of inferior worth or ability.
No wonder I feel sick when I hear that word. Just the word itself sends my mind down the path of fear and pathology and blinds us to what I believe is really happening to all the people who are experiencing extreme states or other experiences that fall under the huge umbrella of mental illness. Mental health is a spectrum of experiences, but I believe all of them are the soul's way of saying it's time to work through this issue or deep pain you have been suppressing that has been blocking you from becoming fully your true self.
How about we use a different word for mental health challenges? How about we just call them mental health challenges and then use severity labels to determine assistance needs from the larger society?
Here's Laura. I'll just do Laura. That sounds better to me.
Me too.
Great, because dinner's ready.
Okay.
So I'll just do a little plug for my dinner groups. We're going to turn them, instead of dinner groups, we're going to turn them into potlucks. And the next one is tomorrow night, and the flyer is this blue one over on the table over there. And the topic for this one is continuing this discussion. So if you're interested in continuing it today, then come on over.
Anybody else wants them? They're here.
So as you could hear, there's a lot of different opinions on the value of diagnosis and the label of mental illness, and there is, as Miranda experiences, huge energy that we feel around that word. And it can be very traumatizing to simply get a label and get a diagnosis when you've gone through an experience that has opened you up to other things. And we don't have a culture that knows how to help and support people. And that's the purpose of this presentation. Through my own experiences and Miranda's, we felt it was time to do a little general community education. So I was rereading Spiritual Emergency. It's edited by Stanislav Grof and Christina Grof, and they've written, there are a series of essays by psychiatrists and psychologists who this was their work, this was their focus for decades. And so I've learned a lot out of this book. There will be that, and 11 other books are part of a resource list that we have that we'll make available. And there are other references that I've used to put the presentation together. I have about 40 minutes worth of slides that I'm going to go through, and we'll do a little Q&A in between. And then we're going to break up into small groups so that we can talk about this with each other a little bit. And then we'll come back and see if there's anything that we want to add at the end. So, one of the things that that's important to remember is that at the time that people are having these experiences, they don't look necessarily any different than experiences of organic pathology when they're extreme states and psychosis. They can look identical, and so it's vital to go to a doctor and have that ruled out. And one of the reasons that this is such an important topic is that there's more and more people that seem to be having these kinds of experiences. And this was in Stanislav Grof's writing in 1960, and I think Assagioli was writing about that in the 50s. And so there's a lot of human transformation that's going on. So the more of us that know more about this and know of resources, we can help friends and family members who are going through these kinds of experiences. So we're going to talk a little bit about definitions. We already went through the dilemma with definitions. We'll look at a variety of spiritual emergency phenomena, the crises that often precede spiritual awakening, crises that are caused by spiritual awakening, phases of the process of spiritual awakening, perils and pitfalls, how to support the process and integrate these and mysticism in our life, the importance of spiritual experience in these times for personal and global health, the fundamental needed social systems changes, pearls from the journey, and then small group discussion. We'll have a chance to share where we're at, any additions to some of the ideas that came up, and any pearls, and then resources and references at the end. So, definitions. First of all, when we're talking about anything spiritual, language is imperfect. So if we can just take a deep breath and accept that. and one person, or you read that there's no way of explaining, and then someone else has just had a wonderful time writing poetry and music and essays explaining. So whether or not we can capture this in words is even something that we don't agree on. Oftentimes we talk about spirituality where people are hearing it as something out there, something that's somehow different than our normal and ordinary lives. Whereas spirituality is the whole range. It's not just these spiritual emergent phenomena. It's all the little things in every day. It's the way everything fits together that we all got here today, despite the traffic, despite the weather, despite all the things that I ran into. You know, there's something really holy about that. And we take the ordinary spiritual reality for granted when we're only thinking in terms of spiritual awakening and spiritual emergence phenomena. So I just want to give voice to the everyday spiritual as being as valuable and potent. When Robert Assagioli writes about spiritual awakenings, he's talking about the deepest feelings of love and oneness with the entire universe. And that's one of the positive experiences. There are negative experiences that people can have. Engulfment by the universe, diabolic tortures, destruction of the world. What Assagioli says is common with all, that's the common denominator of all spiritual awakening. What does it mean to awaken? That means to lift our values to what he calls higher than the average. Ethical, moral, aesthetic, humanitarian, and altruistic. So in other words, for someone, whatever they're going through, to become a more deeply caring individual. And he shares that this comes from our higher states of consciousness, which these experiences often allow us to experience for the first time. Mental illness, on the other hand, we just talked a little bit about. And the whole concept of sanity, R.D. Laing says it's pseudo-sanity at best in our culture. What we take for normal is a path to destruction if anybody is following the ecological story of the earth these days. And so we call this kind of living sane. So we really need to kind of question what we think of as sanity. The Native Americans had a word, which I forget, for the insanity of the white people that included greed, colonization, and these kinds of concepts. For them, that was insanity. What's that?
Philip Glass, Kayanisqatsi.
Okay, you can say that a little louder.
Kayanisqatsi.
Okay, so is that a book?
Philip Glass. Well, it's a word. Philip Glass did it.
Music and it's a movie.
Okay. Okay.
How do you spell it?
K-O-Y-A-N.
Networking, we'll see if we can put that one together. So the reason that we're all here is because traditional psychiatry doesn't distinguish between mental illness and mysticism. And there's a lack of understanding of difficult states, that there's some content in there that is meaningful. That it's not just, oh, this person is hallucinating, they're delusional. There's some deep meaning in all of these experiences. And there's also, we also need to be careful that we're not spiritualizing and glorifying pathological states and overlooking organic pathology. And that's something that is repeated in those who work with people, because it's really easy. It's really easy to miss something, particularly if you know somebody's been traumatized. And sometimes both and are going on. There's that wonderful TED talk by Jill somebody can fill it, the neuroanatomist who had the stroke.
Yeah, I know.
Jill Bolte Taylor, and she's having a stroke in the left side, the rational side of her mind, and so only the right side is functioning. The right side is the intuitive, the mystical. She's having this amazing spiritual experience, which is very real and very, very beautiful. And when the clot dissolves a little bit and there's a little bit of blood flow to the left side, she's like, oh my God, I can't move a side of my body. I can't think clearly. What's happening to me? I think I'm having a stroke. She's in her 30s. You know, what's she doing having a stroke? But she was having a stroke. And then the clot gets a little stronger, and she's not in her left side anywhere. She's only in the right side. She's having this wonderful mystical experience. And then she has a little bit of realization and crawls to the telephone. So that's a TED Talk, and it's worth looking at. And I think if you look neuroanatomist stroke, you'll find it. So, which experiences promote growth and which are pathological? This is a slide that I borrowed from Ron Unger, who's a social worker who's been doing this work for years. And he suggests that the distinction is mostly related to the context in which they occur, the manner in which they're approached, and the ability to integrate them into everyday life. There are many people who have spiritual experiences that are not pathologized, and people who have a lot of resources. They can take the time out that they need to process them, and then they're just back on their feet, and they're functioning at a higher capacity in the work that they did before they had these experiences. And that's not uncommon. Maslow's work, he studied people who had
I just have a question.
Yeah.
You know, if it begins as a spiritual experience, but then it is pathologized, aren't people then maybe pushed into a pathological experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, because it gets all twisted.
It does get all twisted, and then we don't know what's real, as Miranda experienced. And what I loved when I read about Maslow's work was he studied people who were highly functional and were doing amazing things with their life, and almost all of them had these kinds of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a place for them in our evolution, and to become as much as we can be. It seems like it's a human experience.
I have to say, I didn't know what was real at that time when I was being pathologized for it, but now I know it's all real.
It is, and it's where we put that. Where do we put those experiences, and how do we integrate them in our life?
And I also have to say, I'm a real big fan of the book, A Call to Spiritual Emergency, and it's in the back, and it says, you know, it's really hard to make a line. It's really hard to say, this is spiritual emergency, this is pathology. And I see that more and more in some of the newer books that I'm reading, is that, you know, they're kind of intermixed. They just, things happen, and these experiences that we have that are pretty out there are actually, they're actually meaningful. They actually make sense when you look at them from that point of view. Once you learn more about psychic phenomena and that kind of thing, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Why I was, you know, seeing things that I could never see before, or smelling things I could never smell before, or knowing things I could never know before. And so it's been, my psychic friends have been so helpful for me along this journey to say, we went through that too when we had our psychic awakening, and to give me the tools that I needed to, you know, set my own boundaries and keep myself grounded. I wasn't doing any of that when I went into my thing. I didn't know any of those tools. And so now I know those tools, and so now I'm able to, I can go to those realms and come back on my own, and I you know, and I can bring back to this realm gifts from that world that we can offer to everyone. And that's why I'm so passionate about this subject, and we shouldn't be pathologizing anybody, and that's just my thing.
Yeah.
Is it possible to make a generalization to say that one
way of distinguishing a spiritual emergency or transformation from some other organic problem is that in the area of spiritual emergency, spiritual transformation, those people are not acting hostily or aggressively towards or harmfully towards other people.
I don't think that's been identified, because there are people who have gone through spiritual emergent episodes and they're working through hostility, and some of those examples are given in the spiritual emergence. And hostility comes out as part of, particularly if someone has had a lot of trauma, and that stuff is coming out, it can come out in hostile ways. So that, it seems like the only way to tell the difference is retrospectively. When you see how somebody evolves over time, and if somebody is supported, is there capacity for integration? Is there capacity for returning to this world? Yeah, Harriet.
I feel like it's really extremely important for helping guide somebody with their experiences they're having, is to really acknowledge the feelings they're having and guiding toward positive, whatever the problem might be. And I understand there's a possibility of an organic problem going on that is really sick person, but they're also having this experience now, and like being present and guiding that person for a positive experience is really important.
Yes.
And like, what can you learn from this? You know, what's the teaching in this? And really, the other thing is, like, the person who's providing that care, it's on them to be grounded and having resourced themselves and not freaking out.
Yes.
Because that's a really big number reason for people going into the psychiatric place and other people freaking out.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
there's a part here, how do you stay in a place where you're not going to freak out? And it's like the universe is one big, huge
What's that?
place. The universe is a big, huge place, and really keeping that in mind, I think, is really
Yeah. Yeah.
And like going through a close near-death experience, there's so much rich stuff there too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have this bent idea about what's good. You know, it's really strict.
Yeah. And so near-death experiences is on this list. These are a variety of spiritual emergence phenomena. Unitive consciousness is one that's been written about by the mystics, and pretty commonly. That's why I was so dumbfounded when my experience was pathologized, because it seemed like, well, that one seems pretty clear. I'm not down there with the UFO experience, but even those experiences are considered by the authors in Spiritual Emergency to be valid spiritual awakening emergence experiences, and who knows if they happen? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but there are some commonalities in that experience with increases in awareness of self and issues, and Kundalini awakening, often with physical pain. Does anybody need me to just explain what Kundalini awakening is?
Please.
So the Kundalini is an energy that runs up the spine. And the Eastern traditions are aware of this Kundalini phenomena. So oftentimes in spiritual awakening, there's an energy that's felt that actually moves up the spine. And it can be a very painful process, opening up blockages that are in the chakras as it's doing its clearing. And this is a process that can be immediate. It's a process that can go on for days, weeks, months, years. So, but that's what's considered the Kundalini phenomena. Themes of death and world destruction. I didn't experience that one, but that's not an uncommon one. And raise your hand if you've ever experienced that. And okay, so we have a number of people who are far more expert about that than I am, and they've lived to tell about it. Visionary experiences and psychic opening, including attacks by demons, channeling, communication with spirit guides. There are other realms. There are other realms, and just because you talk to your dead aunt who comes and you're having trouble with some negative entity that's coming, doesn't mean that you have a mental illness. It means that you're open to these realms, and we need to find somebody who can help teach us how to have those boundaries when we want them, and how to get entities, just like we do with people who kind of latch on to us and drain our energies. We have to learn that. There are techniques to use in the spiritual realm for clearing those negative energies. Unidentified illness, often of prolonged duration. There's the story of a woman who went through 15 years of that as part of her spiritual emergence. I'd like to think that if we knew a little bit more how to work with people with these things, some of the energetic therapies, the newer therapies that are coming out, maybe we can help people move through these experiences much more quickly, so we don't have to suffer for 15 years. But severe fatigue is one that nobody knows what causes it. Near-death experiences, that's a frequent one of spiritual emergence, and oftentimes people come back from near-death experiences just feeling a sense of security, first of all, because they've seen the other side, it's beautiful, and a much greater feelings of love and compassion for people than prior to their experience. Yeah.
I just want to mention about the kind of like the ego death. Everybody's familiar with your ego, say like they had being grown up, and the fear of whatever I understand the world to be, like well, I could say, but what I wanted to say was the fear of life changing and or somehow how I am in the world changing, that breaking that crisp to a bigger world out there than what I was aware of. There's almost like the ego death. I think the mind, or how I interpret it, is not any different than the fear of death of myself. Mm-hmm. So I think that right there can look like a person is terrified that the world's going to come to an end or they're going to die, but it's actually the potential of evolving into a larger expanding universe in the sense of self. But I don't think, or like say from mind's point of view, and when you're in it, you can't tell that the world's not going to come to an end.
Right.
Or, because anyway.
It just that intent very huge. Past life experiences. Sometimes we don't have a recollection of a past life experience. We simply have an awareness of connections and energies with people and memories of things that we haven't ever done in this life. And these can be very intense emotional experiences. Transitory psychosis, possession states.
What's transitory psychosis?
That's when somebody goes through a temporary psychotic episode. Miranda, you were talking about your experience, that she was open so wide. She's hearing, seeing. They were real. Mm-hmm. They were real, but it's considered psychosis because from the frame of reference of this reality, they're not part of this reality. And yeah.
My first one lasted 4 days before my family finally didn't know what else to do and had to take me to the hospital. And then the following year, I had another one that only lasted like 24 hours, and they were like, "We're not doing this again," and they took me to the hospital right away. So, but in the concept of spiritual emergency, if you have a guide, it's actually encouraged to allow you to go through that process, because if you keep suppressing it, it'll keep trying to come up.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that there's unworked through issues that want to be processed and completed. Yeah.
If you're willing to speak to it, have you gone through that process in a non-hospitalized setting?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes and no. Not in the way where I felt like in a total dream state, and so what I've done in the last year is by having people helping me with the grounding techniques and that kind of thing, is to allow myself to go there. And it's scary at first, and I've had some freaky experiences, but it didn't last very long, and I was able to bring my own self back. And so a lot of it for me was developing those skills, and then just doing it a lot of the thing about spiritual emergency is it's about an escalation, that you're going too fast into these realms without grounding, and if you can just slow the process down, and there's a lot of neat techniques about grounding and that kind of thing. You can just slow it down, so go in a little bit. But what I used to do was, it was like, this feels so great, you're kind of, what we call a manic state, and you don't know really what's happening if it's never happened to you before, and you just want to keep going, and then it just speeds up and speeds up and speeds up and speeds up, and then you don't have any integration time for what you're learning, and it's just like, like all of a sudden you have all this information, because you're like tapped into the universal consciousness, right? And it's like everything is there, and you're just kind of, and you lose sense of all time, and so without a guide, you can get lost in these realms, and the psychic realms especially can be very scary, where all the negative energies hang out. And so anyway, so that's why all the spiritual traditions recommend, when you're going learning about spirituality, go slow. Don't try to escalate it, because these are the kinds of things that can happen. You need to be grounded and just have support through the process.
And in the book Spiritual Emergency, I don't remember which of the writers, most of them were psychiatrists or psychologists, and they actually had a center where they would bring people who were going through spiritual emergency experiences, and that was the center, and that was the goal of it, to be with people. And they write about how challenging that is, and that's on the systems change. How do we create those kinds of places?
Do you want any time support? Like, you have X amount of time left.
No, I think crises. So what precedes a spiritual awakening? One of these: trauma, either to the brain, the body, or severe psychological trauma, life-threatening illness, loss of a loved one, particularly a traumatic loss, but any kind of a loss anything that breaks the heart can break it open. A growing sense of something missing, a deep dissatisfaction or disconnection. Existential depression, that's kind of like the one above it. A moral crisis and an awakening sense of guilt, profound inner conflicts. All of these can feed into, it just kind of, something cracks and breaks and opens up. Now,
got a question over here.
Yeah.
I think another one is just being exposed to a different environment. Being exposed to a whole different environment.
A whole different environment.
That's
There's
true.
different signals going on.
Yeah, traveling to another country often.
We're going into nature.
Yep.
Those things also are
Cultural.
a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Or to a different
Going-
class experience, like people who come from a more sheltered, privileged place, who end up having an experience of what so many people end up living on the streets or whatever.
There you go.
Cracks people wide open.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And remembering that not all these are negative experiences. What Terry said, experiences in nature are very common for positive spiritual experience.
Falling in love.
What's that?
Yes.
Falling in love. That's
sure.
one of the big ones. Yeah. So the crises that can be caused by spiritual awakening. So if it's an overwhelming experience like what Miranda has described, that itself can be traumatizing, particularly if an individual gets stuck for a long time in these negative domains. The misunderstanding by our culture and the dominant mental health system that can lead to misdiagnosis, invalidation, harmful medicalization. The medications are as traumatic, and they can be. For some people, they're very helpful. And there's also a crisis where we understand these experiences, but there's no place for them to unfold. And it's just kind of a crisis of situation. Somebody is working to support their family, they've got a family, and all of a sudden they fall apart. You know, it's like, and they've got this whole life that needs to be supported by the social system. Another crisis is feeding and inflating the personal ego. Loss of distinction between small self and large self. And that it's very common for people who have mystical experiences to feel like we're Jesus. I mean, you just feel we're one with the world, and we have this energy. And I will confess that when I had my experience, that's what went through my mind. It's like, wow, maybe I'm Jesus, and I'm here, and you know. And it's like, okay, Harriet, that's a thought. Let's see. Let's see. The proof is in the pudding, and you know. So we can have these grandiose ideas, but when we keep them in the perspective of, okay, this is an idea that I'm having, let's see what integrates into life. The Jesus thing is very common, by the way, especially for us Jews. Lack of discrimination of revelation. So that's another thing. People, you know, you get these downloads and it feels so real. I had this an experience like this about another individual. What I experienced was so powerful and so out of this world. It had to be real. But the meaning that it had in my mind was not a shared meaning, even though what I experienced was really very real. The same thing for any kind of revelation. So whatever revelations we're having in these experiences, we have two sides of the brain. God made us that way so that we could kind of check in. Okay, that's a very real experience. We had it. Let's see how it makes sense in this world. Let's check it out and kind of work with it. And there are people that like to go far to the, let's just live life in alignment with these revelations. And there's consequences and experiences that come from that. So my suggestion is kind of a balanced approach. Lack of integration and disconnection from shared reality and life. So when people's experience are out there and there's no desire to come back. And there's this famous little story about Rabbi, I think it was either Rabbi Hillel or Rabbi Akiva, who take these other three rabbis on a mystical journey. He teaches them this meditation. So they all go to the holy place of oneness, Eden, and one of them dies, one of them goes crazy, and one of them forgets. He doesn't believe in God afterwards, and only Rabbi Akiva goes back to his usual life of helping everybody in his community and teaching basic morality and just doing what he does. So the Kabbalists say that it's important to be grounded. It's important to really love your life and have things in your life that you love before exploring other realms, so that you want to come back. And I think that when people have severe traumas and a traumatic life experience, and they have these mystical experiences, who wants to come back?
Right.
You know?
So I also want to add to that it's not just that choose that we don't want to come back. I would go into these realms and I would totally forget this personality, because I am the oneness. We all are the oneness at some level, and when we go in there without the grounding, there was a point where I was like, if I go any further with this, I'm going to totally forget how to get back to that personality, that manifestation of this oneness. And so I don't want you to feel like a loved one didn't come back because it wasn't going good, and they're, you can get lost out there. It's not necessarily a choice sometimes. You just forget what that was, because you are the oneness, and there's so much out there that how can you possibly bring this into this again? You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I had one teacher tell me that she did have more like what Harriet was saying, where she was like, yeah, this is really great. I'm really grooving on this. And her guides said, do you know how many souls are waiting to have this experience of getting to be embodied? And she was like, oh, you know, and then somebody, I don't remember if it was the same person or somebody was saying, you know, maybe it was Miranda, said, we have a lot of time before we're born and a lot of time when we're dead. Was that you, Miranda?
Yes, that was
another
me.
teacher. You know,
this is where it's at, folks.
And this is like, we only get this little short period of time, so we might as well experience it. So
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so phases of the process of spiritual emergence. So oftentimes, and these are phases that were described by some of the authors, and I do also want to make a point that the diabasis, the name of the place that they had created where people can go through these experiences, they're not alone. So to have guides, so if someone is starting to go through an experience, to make sure that there's somebody with them to help them. So like Miranda said, you can help people come back if they get too lost.
All right. Can you clarify something? You used two terms, spiritual emergency and spiritual emergence. Is the idea that spiritual emergency is what spiritual emergence comes out of?
Yes. Spiritual emergence is the shift, the big shifts in consciousness that can happen where we become aware of things that, that we previously were unaware of. Spiritual emergency is what happens when something is challenging about the spiritual emergence, to where we're having trouble getting back, we're having trouble grounding, we're having trouble relating with people, where we can't function in this world anymore. And so if there's a significant problem with our ability to function in this world, spiritual emergence, which can be a very peaceful and beautiful experience, but if we're not able to come back and integrate back into our life, that's when it becomes the spiritual emergency.
It's not a coincidence that you've got these two terms, emergence and emergency, connected together.
Right. Phases of the process of spiritual emergence. So for those of us who had these wonderful awakenings, well, let's just start with number one. Some kind of dissatisfaction, inner restlessness, loss of interest in life, or any of the other crises that were on the other slide. So there's something that happens. And then there's a spiritual experience with elation. There's a temporary capital self-realization. That's the awareness of connection with the one, with all. And when and sometimes there is healing. Oftentimes it catalyzes healings on psychological levels, physical levels. We're aware of things inside of ourselves that we weren't aware of before. And then we come back to normal consciousness. And there can be a psychotic depression that occurs after that in some people, where their reality is so challenging that there's this deep pain of losing that higher state. And doubt and criticism can be there. For other people, there can be appreciation, and it can feel like they're guided because they've made this connection and now they've got some guidance. So it can be all over the board. Divine homesickness that can lead to psychotic depression. And the work of transmutation of personality. So there is a process, once we come down, there's a process of working on ourselves through our life work. And that is the continued process of our spiritual emergence, our spiritual development. So it's not just up there in the highs, it's when we get that catalyst and that awareness, it's coming back and now living our life from this higher level of caring and maybe a greater strength and a greater courage than we had beforehand. and a gradual appreciation of life infused with meaning and purpose. Perils and pitfalls. Attributing qualities of the higher self to the self, severe rebound depression, social withdrawal for people that are unbalanced in the inner work and they're not still doing that inner work with the outer world, in even minimal ways. Forceful inhibition and repression of sexuality or hypersexuality. So either of those things can come through spiritual experience. And Ram Dass is getting trapped in expectations of these experiences. There's so many people who have had these experiences and then become seekers for more of these highs rather than, let's just integrate that one into the rest of my life. But that seeking rather than, he calls it spiritual materialism. There can also be grief of losing who we thought we were, which Mark was touching on a bit with that ego death. Maslow talks about experiential living unbalanced by organizational and rational living. And it can become so inwardly searching that people can become selfish and lose the patience and compassion that we connect with in these experiences. People can pursue triggers with disregard for the consequences. Mistaking voices and revelations for absolute truth with loss of discernment of how they fit into this world, where they're coming from, and what they mean. And also regular use of alcohol and sedatives to slow down the process can lead to addiction, and that's either not medications, prescription medications, are highly addictive, as well as street drugs. So, optimal approaches. So number one, so what do we do when somebody's awakening? Rule out organic etiology, so a good medical evaluation. Open to the awareness that there are renewal and transformative processes and that may well be going on. And most of the time, that is what's going on. Offer a safe, supportive retreat, a therapeutic environment where the individual can process their experience in a safe way and integrate the healing.
I'm going to be offering those, by the way. So
what's that?
I'm going to be offering those, by the way. So contact me if you want to go.
If you can remember to do that.
Guidance and support by knowledgeable individuals, people who have been through this and are helping. And it's Groff talks about how essential it is to own all the experience and not project whatever we're experiencing onto other people, because we know that spiritual experiences have often been connected religiously to demonizing the other. And so that is a potential. So he really encourages us, as in the Quran they talk about the greater jihad and the lesser jihad. And the greater jihad is the big work. That big work is finding the battle inside yourself. The hero's journey, right. Another issue is that deeply empathic individuals, as we go through this, can feel the pain of others and the challenging situations in the world. And so we need to learn simple tools to claim healthy boundaries and reclaim our personal energies. Dr. Perry talks about how in the high arousal state, archetypal consciousness is activated and the psyche autonomously is doing its own work in its own fashion, kind of like in the dream, there's healing happening just by having the dream. You don't have to interpret a dream for there to be healing. Sometimes a dream itself is just taking a lot of the negative energy and it's doing a little dance with it. And there's healing just by having that dream. The same thing can be happening through spiritual emergence experiences. Know when to slow down the process, stop or reduce meditation, and increase grounding activities, judicial use of medications when needed. Mediation. What's that?
Mediation.
Did I write mediation? Medication.
Meditation.
I wrote mediation, but I meant medication.
It's basically
Oh no, I meant meditation.
Meditation.
So we have mediation, meditation, and medication.
I would like to say about
Yeah.
grounding. You can actually, well, there's actually a guy who had an experience like yours, except he was in Alaska and is way out in the boonies. But he got completely naked in the cold and went down underneath his house to ground on the earth.
Yes.
And there's a movie about it because he was a National Geographic guy who does videography and stuff. And I have the stuff, like my son who's a geophysicist got me, you know, you plug it into that third plug thing.
Oh, the grounding,
The
earthing.
grounding stuff.
Ha!
And
Yes.
so I have had cramps in legs and stuff. So mostly it was the left leg. So I was putting it on this little circle thing on my left leg on kidney 1 down there. And the right leg got jealous one day. I began doing it, and I had to take it off. It woke me up and put it on the other leg. It's very interesting. It's not going to work for everybody, but it's something to play with and try.
Yes.
Because it is literally grounding.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
And
not
there's-
really abstractly grounding.
There's a book called Earthing that talks about this.
Yeah.
And if you all look at your shoes, you'll see that our shoes have rubber soles, and that's a
Insulators.
great insulator from the earth. So humans are meant to grounding ourselves with the earth, and with modern shoe technology, we're all pretty ungrounded most of the time. So finding some time to walk barefoot is a way. So the book is called Earthing.
I want to ask a quick question here. When you said stop or reduce, and you meant to say meditation, correct?
Meditation,
Okay.
yes.
I have a question about that, because meditation seems to affect your ability to relax. I know I'd be a basket case if I didn't meditate.
Yes.
So I want to ask a question, why in this process it would be different to use meditation to relax, which is what I've always done, as opposed to something else.
I can speak to that. It's that thing that there's spiritual emergence, and then there's spiritual emergency, is when you go into the spiritual psychic realms too quickly, and you don't have any context for that. I know that you know how to manage those realms just perfectly fine, so you don't have any problem with that. But for those of us who have no context at all with that, and we zoom into there too fast, practices like meditation are intended to help you get to those realms, but you're supposed to do them slowly and integrate them. So if you are having a spiritual emergency, then you need to stop meditation and start going mindfulness into your body and do things, physical labor, grounding, like working in the garden, and get out of your head as much as possible. You want to focus, and it's not like get out of your head in meditation, la la land, like meditation is kind of up here. You want to be in your body. You want to walk on the earth. I mean, I started to have this law experience, and I just went outside and said, I belong on the earth, I belong on the earth, and that really helps. So just things like that, be in your body, focus on your body, so brings you back in.
So so if you're a meditator, you could switch to walking meditation, awareness meditation, that kind of meditation on the body, mindfulness meditation is appropriate, but not the inner journey where
the breathing would be part of it as well.
Yes.
You can do deep breathing
Yes.
as part of
If you're
meditation.
focusing on your
the physical
Yes.
actual activity.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm sure that there are I know that there are, I'm not going to go into them, but specific breathing exercises that can help bring us back.
Water is very good, salt baths, all kinds of
I wanted to talk about the vagus nerve just briefly because a head injury, which I've had, and other things can affect that, and that nerve can affect balance, dizziness, blood pressure, all sorts of things. And if you have something going on with that, that is sort of a physical thing, but not really, because nobody really understands it. and some of the best stuff I've seen is from a philosopher at UC Berkeley. It's not even from anyone who's a neuroscientist.
So I'm just gonna. I'm looking at the time, and I want us to have time for small groups. The other thing is finding networks of support groups where people can process this information.
And there's a list of support groups in Portland on the table for taking out, but check with them first because not all of them are still going.
How to support the process of spiritual emergence. Doesn't have to be an emergency, but to direct our energies purposefully and constructively towards both work out in the world and inner regeneration, creative expression, and fruitful service.
May I say, in this case, there are some people that actually go the opposite way. Because of my culture, I mean, I grew up with santeros and witches and healers, and so as a consequence, for me, that was normal. And then when I became part of the Yale University Ivy League, all of a sudden I'm a freak. I had to learn to act like little Miss American and forget all about my cultural stuff that I learned. And be different, and so I went the opposite way.
Well, this is for people again who
went from this way to that way.
Yeah, and it's about finding the balanced place. It's about finding the balanced place, and somebody who has kind of come through their experience, and can integrate it with the world. That's where we're trying to get people to. And it can be a tumultuous journey to get there for many people. So getting sufficient and regular sleep, nutrition, exercise, community, stay connected to community. Slow the process down when it's overwhelming or impractical. It's sad to say, but that's the reality in our culture. A lot of times it is impractical. You have to take care of your family, your children. And so you can't be going on a retreat to do this inner work right then. Physical work, acupuncture, energy medicine, massage, and body work, because there's often psychosomatic things going on and releases that are coming through the body. Trauma clearing is really important. There's a lot of energy medicine therapists. Positive attachment, if there are some attachment issues, I'm not going to go into that, that were part of this stormy process. When we're in this process, sometimes we go through a period of time when our mind is not functioning as well as it was. In fact, that's pretty normal. When our mind is reorganizing, the picture of the butterfly and that chrysalis phase when there's all these imaginal cells, but it doesn't know, it can't think like a butterfly or a caterpillar because it's in this in-between stage. So just honor that if you've had experience or someone's had these experiences, help them in ways that they can still be part of this world and be working their minds, simplifying, identifying priority values and commitments to those things. Make life smaller while you're going through this process. A lot of us have to use lots of notes and date timers. And if we have big visions, if big visions come from these experiences, one step at a time, and beginning in the body, where I'm at, what can I create from this moment to the next, even if I have that great vision, but really commit to what can I do in the here and now. Intermittent use of supplements and medications as needed can be very helpful. And why is it important for spiritual awakening? Why is it important for all of us who haven't had experiences, or those of us who have had experiences and they've been traumatic, to be open to, when it's time, not to force them, but just to be open to the possibility that maybe there's another one in this lifetime that's here for us and for other people. It is a catalyst for psychological and spiritual evolution. It can help us connect to kind of the goal of, I hate to say the goal of being human, that's not the right, the optimal self-actualization, being who we are. I don't know if I put it.
I think it's important at that time also to be around people that are open and friends that accept you the way you are.
Absolutely.
Instead of thinking that you're whacked.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Absolutely.
It seems like breaking through any self-criticism, judgment, or hatred, evolving spiritually, you get to, you have to break out of that pattern, whether others are doing it to you or you learn to do it to yourself. I think that spiritual emergence can break through some of that judgment that keeps us always small.
Yes, yes. And becoming our more authentic self is, and that was something that Miranda talked about that came out of her experience, is that she got to start becoming who she was instead of who other people expected her to be. And that's this powerful process that comes through these experiences. Motivations shift from power and control to motivations from radiant love. And what radiant means, not just being in love, but being in love, radiating love, and the way that we interact with other people in loving ways, and that expands and develops with these experiences. And it can awaken inner healing capacities. We can identify and decrease personal mishigas or neurosis. And I loved when Ram Dass talked about, after all of his experiences, he says, I'm just as neurotic, I have the same neuroses as when I started, but they're smaller. And he and his colleagues felt like going through these experiences would really help, clear up all these little neurotic tendencies. But his experience was they just get a little smaller, and you don't take them so personally, and it's just what it is. You can laugh at them. Mm-hmm. The other issue is spiritual emergence and global health. We're living in times of e-convergence, crisis of ecology, economics, and empire, and overutilization of the Earth's resources, species decline, climate change, pollution, widening income disparities. We need people who aren't afraid to wake up and step up.
Absolutely. I think we should all do our part. For me, the only thing I could do, I wrote a book which is coming out at the end of December, but it's to help humanity about 3D printers and about interacting the spiritual side of us with them. We're going to have to get along with them because they're here. So
What's
totally,
the book called?
I'm sorry?
What's the book going to be called?
It's called Inked. It's about Portland, Oregon. It takes place here. INKD, Inked.
Oh, Inked.
Yeah, it'll be, hopefully if my daughter doesn't give birth, and she's an English professor, she's editing the book. I'm a writer, I'm not an editor. So I'm just here to help people. I'm just a clairvoyant.
Everybody needs an editor.
So I'm not an editor, but if she doesn't have my grandson in 3 weeks, which she's supposed to, the book will be out the end of December. And not in January. So I'm sorry.
So that's okay. So these transformative experiences have the potential to raise consciousness to higher states of caring and responsibility. And we need that. So there's a lot of systems changes that need to happen, both at the level of the medical system and to create safe places for working through these intense transformative experiences, to campaign against the prejudice and discrimination on mental health grounds. And I think we definitely are making headway in some of these areas, but a lot of psychiatrists don't value these experiences and know what to do with them.
Terrified of them often.
Some of them are terrified of them. Right. So we need to identify and work with allies. We also need to do the bigger picture stuff of minimizing unnecessary life trauma that's associated with the more debilitating spiritual emergency, so that people can have spiritual emergence without it being such challenging and emergent and difficult experiences. Having a safer society, decreasing income disparities, reduced discrimination and oppression, reducing harmful drug use and its causes, all of those are related with increased psychosis, schizophrenia, which are potentially healing. But when we've when we don't have a system that really supports the validity and the value of everybody, it can be very challenging. So there's like bigger social system changes that need to happen. And we need to all work to allocate resources for all these good things. Pearls from the journey. I think I'm going to wait with this, and let's break into small groups of 3 or 4 people, and just we're going to spend about 15 minutes just talking with each other where I'm at on my journey, pearls from my experience, and if there's anything that really jumped out, if there was something that was left out. After the small groups, we're going to come back together, and there'll be time for more pearls from the journey.
So how long do we have for the small group?
About 15 minutes.
Okay.
Book is shaking qigong. Raise your hand if you've ever done shaking qigong. Shaking. Okay, so everybody's going to stand up. We're going to take everybody who's able. And if you're not able to stand up, you can do this sitting down too. And we're just going to take 2 minutes, and you can do this for 4 minutes, and just shake. And it's way more fun if there's music, so if we have anybody that's really musical and wants to sing, go for it. Come on, baby, let the good times roll. Come on, baby, let the good times roll. And shake your head. And shake your head. And keep going. And bounce. If you feel like bounce, and take your hand and just shake your hands, and your head, and your shoulders. And if you're feeling like you're a little contained, do it a little uncontained. Especially if you're feeling stuck. If you're feeling stuck, really unstick it. And this is something. Circle, scream, and shout. Right, you can write in shirt, and you can scream and shout. Okay, since we don't have music, let's take the next. Is there anybody who's too sensitive to screaming and shouting right now?
How about just animal noises?
How about we buzz like bees?
That's good. Buzzing is safe. How about that?
Okay. So just
Are you freaking anybody out here?
notice what you feel in your body.
And the altered states being engaged.
Tired. I feel my heart racing. I feel like energy flowing in my body. And this is great for anxiety, getting anxiety out. It's great for getting things moving. And this is something that you can do every morning for when you get up in the morning for 4 to 5 minutes. Put on music that you like and just shake out whatever the dreams are. It's one of the many, many things that we can do. So that's a little pearl. Now we'll sit down. So I put up my pearls, and I'm going to go through, so some of these are, yes?
There's a wonderful book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and it talks about how our primitive stress responses don't work very well in the modern world, and the author talks about how if a zebra escapes a lion, it shakes itself off to alleviate that fear that it's just felt, and that's how it recovers. So.
It sounds like at the end of the day, coming back home is the time to do the shaking.
Right.
Well, that's even a term. Shake it up, you know. Shake it up.
I wanted to, I've been doing a study recently, and I haven't perfected it yet because I'm a real, really, what do they call that? I have to.
Perfectionist?
I have to have like Virgo. I think I have Virgo somewhere with my friends. But I would like to bring your attention that would be helpful here if I may. There's the reticular activating system at the bottom of the base of your head. And the reticular activating system recently has been noted as your manifesting system or your frequency system. And I think that I'm getting close to understanding that is the fact that you really are the treasure tower and what they say the kingdom of heaven is within you. You really are the treasure tower. Because if you think about a white Volvo, you'll start to see white Volvos.
So the truth is that the white bubble was always there. So now the new concept is saying that instead of the secret, the real truth about the secret is we actually are born with a reticular activating system, which only allows certain frequencies in. And I believe that what happens when we're going through this state that this wonderful lady is presenting to us, that we're having an overload of frequency into that system. It's not filtering. So basically, the reticular activating system is our manifesting system, which is allowing too many things in instead of filtering what it's supposed to, supposedly, on a regular basis. That's what I kind of playing around with that idea. You might want to check that out. It's kind of fun to think about that. Yes.
So I just add on from biology standpoint, the reticular activating system is what wakes you up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to run through these.
No, Success Magazine. If you look at Success Magazine, you can Google it. It's talking about this reticular activating system is really what is helping you have the secret of manifesting. Yeah, so, and I believe it's a filter, and maybe our filters get all whacked out when we're going through this phase. I think that's what happened to me, what she's describing, because I definitely went through that. I'm grateful for this event, and I want to thank her and all the people putting this event together.
Okay, so we'll run through these, and then I want to hear pearls from the audience. So why are we willing to explore losing our minds for a period of time at this time? The desire and need for humanity to reach more expanded states of consciousness, capacities, and caring. So I'm not sure that I can, change anything but myself, essentially. And so we work at changing ourselves. Grounding ourselves in daily activities and grounding our spiritual practice in daily activities. So it's not like there's a spiritual practice and then there's the rest of life. Integrating it all, making our lives sacred and holy and beautiful. Patience, non-judgmental acceptance while working on our growth and emergence to get to the point of positive self-identity and comfort in our own skin. Sometimes when we have spiritual emergence phenomena, we have all these amazing ideas, and we just have this passion for things that are really a little bit beyond our scope and ability at the time that we're having those visions and those passions and things. So it's okay to be patient. Start where we are and be happy with whatever we get accomplished. Just do a little something each day. Just keep moving it forward. As long as we're doing our best, know that this is exactly what we're here to do. And I had a conversation with a friend yesterday because some people, it's like their life's work is to heal. There's been so much trauma. They may have visions and beautiful ideas that they want to contribute to, but they're so busy dealing with cleaning up inner stuff that there can be frustration about not being able to be in the world. I have a client like that. Her work is to be at peace with exactly what she can do and to process what she can and to continue to send her love out to the world in all the ways and all the things that she does. And that's her work, because she continually has to clear from the physical issues that she deals with. So patience and self-love are key. Identify and developing non-judgmental witness, that's part of a mindfulness practice, so that we're not as reactive, so that when we have some of these states and we're feeling really big emotions, for those of us that feel really big emotions, we don't have to react to them. We can just feel it. And there's a YouTube video, and I think it's on the resource page out there, Bipolar or Waking Up. And he has this wonderful illustration. And he talks about how he used to just try and narrow his life experience into the normal. And now he can feel the highs and he can feel the lows. He feels it all, and he's able to direct his behaviors and his life. So no matter what he's feeling, he's able to do his presentations. He's able to live in the world, knowing that all of those feelings are just transient states. They're just transient states, and continuing to do the grounding practices and the spiritual practices and the community events and connections that really keep our hearts grounded and connected and growing. So evolving from the material rational only to valuing the intuitive, supported by the rational mind. And while we're at whatever capacity we're at in the world, continuing to study and learn and identify the vision that we want to see in this world and getting excited about it. And like Gandhi says, be the change that we wish to see in the world. So these are my last three. Before what pearls from folks that have been working on this stuff? Anything that you want to contribute? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I want to say that meeting your worst fears, you can have the most happiness. Without meeting your fear, you can't be happy.
Meeting your worst fears can lead to happiness, but if you're avoiding your fears, you're not going to be happy. I would ditto that one. When we grow our heart, we're not just growing our capacity to love, but we're growing our courage. Thank you. Beautiful. 1, 2, 3.
One important takeaway for me is that I think that there is an element to any amount of psychic pain that we all go through, whatever the thing that creates it. But one piece of it that I think is common to most people is a feeling of inherent wrongness with what we're feeling. And I think that if we can adopt an attitude and we can surround ourselves with people who accept us wherever we are, no matter what we're feeling, is that there's nothing wrong with us, that what we are feeling is legitimate, however problematic it may be, then that wipes away a whole amount of damage, just that one thing.
Beautiful. Thank you. Did everybody hear that?
Yes. I guess building off of what you just said is that I had that so much of my life, and now I get to offer that space to others, and it's such an amazing experience to be able to give what was given to me so freely.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
I think
wait a second. Yeah.
Having personally experienced being in the darkest place possible, including the state mental hospital, and seeing many peers and learning their experiences, I've come to learn that any one or combination of treatment modalities will not work unless somebody has basic hope, a thread of hope, compassion, faith, and feeling loved by at least one other person. If those things aren't in place, you can, do all these different, therapies, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So we need to remember the basics as well.
Yes.
And say again, the basics are compassion, hope, faith, and
feeling loved by at least one other person.
Thank you.
That's it. I just wanted to iterate. That's a very important point, that you feel love. Meaning, it doesn't mean how many people are loving you, but actually you have to feel genuinely loved by another person.
Right.
That's a big thing in the dividing role of what people are giving to you and what you're actually able to receive.
Right.
That's very true.
Right. And that non-judgmental awareness to our own inner states, that kind of a practice is a way of loving ourselves. So when we can have non-judgmental curiosity about the states, the feelings that go on inside of ourselves, that's a way of loving ourselves and teaching ourselves how to love. And then we can extend that to others as well. Okay, so it's a little after 9. 3 more hands.
Well, just what we were talking about our group was sort of the mirror of what you were saying, that if you really want to help somebody that is in one of these spiritually emergent or emergency conditions, that being that non-judgmental, genuine interest and curiosity in what's going on is probably the best thing that you can do to help that person, because the last thing they need is somebody else telling them either what they shouldn't be experiencing or what the meaning of their experiences is. They need somebody to be interested in having them explain it to you about what's actually happening, and that has some of that grounding effect that you were talking about as well.
Thank you.
I have seen in my own career as a clairvoyant and prophet that I have had a lot of people recently, as she was saying, with this amazing, that's how I met Miranda, with this amazing confusion and pain, because they think they're very normal people. Like I have a trucker who's like, I don't believe in this boogie stuff, but I've been seeing dead people. And then I have other people that say, I've been experiencing this. And for me, I have to understand, not just as a clairvoyant, but as a human being, their suffering and what they're going through, because to them, what they're experiencing isn't normal. Like I had a client just recently who's a trucker, regular, average, everyday guy, doesn't believe in anything, doesn't do a lot of reading, he's a trucker. His family doesn't want to talk to him anymore. His girlfriend doesn't want to be around him anymore, because the guy is coming into his psychic abilities and seeing people on the other side and doing all this. And it's so important to just make people feel that they're normal and have them understand that the story that they're making up, that's just a story. Don't believe the story that you yourself make up and think is the way it should happen. Change the story. And so I'm glad for these kind of events, because I felt so sorry for him. My whole heart went out to this man. I'm trying to tell him, you're okay. It's all right for you to be a trucker and be clairvoyant. It's not weird. It's okay.
I have one little gem that I just want to share that was so important in my evolution through this journey. Before I met my wonderful psychic friends that helped me through this process, I came to Rethinking Psychiatry, and I thought it was sort of an either-or thing. You want to get off the drugs because they're really damaging to your body, and so I really went that way. And my wonderful psych nurse practitioner, when I was starting to feel escalating again, and I didn't want to go back on the drugs, she said, well, Miranda, have you ever thought about just taking one little small dose when you start to feel like your grounding techniques aren't doing it for you? And I said, no. And I took 5 milligrams of Zyprexa when I started feeling just a little bit escalated after a year of being completely off the drugs. And I tell you what, that was 2 years ago, and I haven't had anything since. And that made such a difference for me, because then that allowed me to really be able to expand where I felt comfortable going in my joy, because I had like this little backup plan. And so not saying it's all or nothing with the drugs, that made a huge difference for me. And just a small little dose can do so much, which really makes me say, oh my God, how can we give these doses to people like every day? That's like, we don't need that much. Our bodies just need a little reminder, oh, okay, back here. So that was my big thing that helped me a lot.
And I'm going to close with thank you to everybody. And a reminder that love is a verb, not just a feeling. It's a practice. And don't wait to feel love. Participate in loving. And, just keep that energy going. Gratitude is another piece that is so powerful at shifting inner states. And Miranda, thank you so much for bringing up the bit about medications. And everybody is a unique individual. Some people need a medication every day, and some people need it once in a while. Some of us need supplements, and they do miracles for us. We're all different, and so know that. And Grace has a final
2 quick comments. So if you haven't had a chance to gift the basket with your green yummy food,
Greenery.
It helps us pay for the space. But you are welcome to be here with however much or little in that form of energy you give, because your being here is the most important thing. And the other thing is Happy Hanukkah to whoever who celebrates.
I forgot. Hanukkah comes at the darkest night of the year. So, and we often have little gold coins made out of chocolate. Well, these aren't coins, but it's dark chocolate, and it's equal exchange. There is no child labor. There is, it's organic, fair trade. And so help yourself to some of these on the way out. Networking. Raise your hands if you brought cards to let people know about your practice and your help. Raise them high. Raise them high.
How about we just say our names if we did that?
I'm Willow Moore. I'm an naturopath, and I'm an equine facilitated instructor using courses to help people evolve and learn boundaries.
I'm Evelyn Eaglesong. I'm at New Renaissance Bookstore. You can also look me up under EvelynEaglesong.com. And please forgive me when Miranda told me to bring my cards. I thought she meant to bring these cards.
Contact information.
I'm Grace Sylvia. I'm a body-centered psychotherapist, and I work through the Amanda Holistic Mental Health Clinic, and I have cards over there.
What's your name again?
Grace Sylvia.
I'm Miss Smith. I'm a spiritual mentor, spiritual counselor, channel, and I do help people travel and navigate these realms. So contact me if you're curious. I do free 15-minute consultations.
Hi, I'm Tom Cloud, and I'm a private researcher and writer and human geography explorer through spirituality. And I have my story to share. I'm also a master social worker and peer support. I offer myself as a 10 with Tom friendship gesture to check in 10 minutes with Tom and be a free 10 minutes.
10 minutes with Tom. Beautiful, beautiful. And don't forget about the meeting tomorrow night, Tom.
What's that?
So you're all invited to come to my house tomorrow for a potluck.
Okay.
The blue pages over on the table have the information about that.
I'll also make a website called timwithtom.com. That sounds pretty good.
Okay.
And there were other cards.
And I brought literature from Right to Survive, Right to Dream too, and help people who are experiencing homelessness to have community and create culture and voice for everybody else to hear what the experience is.
And that's
Can you repeat
these
that,
over
Terry?
here.
I'm sorry. Can you say it one more time, please?
Right to Dream too, which is on 4th and Burnside.
Right to Dream.
Creating a safe place for people to sleep so they don't go crazy because they don't have any sleep.
Thank you.
And that's this one over here.
Okay, and Carlo.
Carlo Calabrese, naturopathic physician. Practice what I call naturopathic psychological medicine, and my path is to try to figure out exactly what that is.
And I'm Harriet Cooke, and we do this. We do this at for celebration. And I do have cards. I have a very small practice. Most of my time these days is I'm working on my second book. My first book is out, and I brought a few copies. They're $16, and there's 2 of them out there. It's called Ghost Woman. I have a couple more in my pack. And I do have a small practice. I do holistic counseling and energy medicine, help people reconnect to that center, and also trauma clearing is a big piece of the work that I do. So I do have some cards out there. And whoever gets a card, as I'm able to get back to you, we will have a telephone conversation and see if we're right and how and when we can fit into each other's schedules. So thank you all for showing up.